The Sweethearts by Hans Christian Andersen. The top and the ball lay in a drawer together among the other playthings, and one day the top said to the ball, "Couldn't we be sweethearts? After all, we lie in the same drawer together, don't we?" But the ball, who was covered in morocco leather and fancied herself like any other fine young lady, couldn't be expected to answer a question like that. The next day the little boy who owned the toys came and painted the top red and gold and drove a brass nail right through it. When the top spun round, it looked really magnificent. "Just look at me," it said to the ball. "Well, what do you say now? Don't you think we could be sweethearts? We are really very well suited to one another. You jump and I dance. No one could ever be happier than we two." "What an idea," said the ball. "You obviously don't know that my mother and father were morocco leather slippers and that I've a cork inside me." "Yes, but I'm made of mahogany," said the top, "and the Major himself turned me. He has a lad of his own, and it gave him a great deal of pleasure too." "Do you really expect me to believe that?" said the ball. "May I never be whipped again if I tell a lie?" answered the top. "You speak very well for yourself," said the ball, "but it's quite impossible. I'm as good as half engaged to a swallow. Every time I go up in the air, he bobs his head out of his nest and says, 'Will you? Will you?' And now I've said yes to myself, and that's as good as half an engagement. But I promise you I shall never forget you." "Well, that'll be a great help," said the top, and after that they spoke no more to one another. The next day the ball was taken out. The top watched it flying high up in the air, just like a bird, until at last it was lost to sight. It came back again every time, but it always gave a high jump as it touched the ground, and that was either because it was restless and impatient, or because it had a cork inside it. The 9th time the ball disappeared and did not come back anymore. The boy searched and searched, but there was no doubt about it. It had disappeared. "I know well enough where it is," sighed the top. "It's in the swallow's nest, and it's married to the swallow." The more the top thought about the ball, the deeper in love he fell. Just because he could not have her, his passion for her grew. But the really odd thing was that she had accepted someone else, and the top danced round and spun, but his thoughts were always on the ball, and in his fancy she grew ever more beautiful, and so many years went by, and his love was a thing of the past. The top was no longer young. Then one day it was gilded all over. It had never looked so handsome before. It was now a gold top, and it jumped about until it hummed again. Yes, that was something like. But all at once it jumped too high and disappeared. They looked and looked, even down in the cellar, but still they could not find it. Where was it? It had jumped into the dustbin, where all sorts of things were lying. Sweepings, grit, and all things that had fallen down from the gutter. Well, this is a fine place to be in. My gilding will soon come off here, and what sort of outcasts have I got among? And he looked out of the corner of his eyes at a long gathered stalk that had been stripped far too closely, and at a curious round thing that looked like an old apple. But it was no apple, it was an old ball that had lain for many years up in the gutter, and been soaked through with water. Thank heaven, here's someone of my own kind I can talk to, said the ball, looking at the gilt top. I'm really made of Morocco leather, stitched by a young lady's own hands, and I have a cork inside me, though no one would think so to look at me. I was just going to be married to a swallow, when I fell into the gutter, and there I lay, soaking wet, for 5 years. That's a long time for a young lady, believe me. But the top said nothing. He thought of his old sweetheart, and the more he heard her say, the more certain he was that this was she. Then the maid came along to turn out the dustbin. Hooray, she said, here's the gold top. And the top went back to the living room and was made much of. But nothing was heard of the ball, and the top never mentioned his old love again. Love dies when your sweetheart has lain soaking in a gutter for 5 years. In fact, you take care not to recognize her again when you meet her in the dustbin.